Charlie Kirk's activism on college campuses was criticized both during his life and following his assassination. As far as I can tell, the most common criticisms of his activism were the following. Number one, he debated college students while he himself was professionally involved in politics. Number two, he wasn't there to actually change his mind. And number three, he wanted clips of him dunking on college students rather than substantive conversations. As someone who debated Charlie at his Prove Me Wrong event at Michigan State University, and as someone who has gone to college campuses to have conversations with students myself, I think I can offer a unique perspective on Kirk's activism. My goal here isn't to defend everything Charlie and Turning Point USA has ever done or said, but rather to address the most common criticisms of his campus activism, which I believe either lack merit or misunderstand what Charlie was trying to accomplish. Criticism number one, he debated college students. While it is obviously true that college students may not be as prepared for a debate as a professional political pundit, those going up to the microphone had the opportunity to prepare ahead of time, and Charlie let them use notes while he himself, as far as I can tell, had no notes. I know this firsthand. His campus tour had a calendar, and when I saw he would be at Michigan State University, I thought it would be helpful to prepare in advance so our conversation could be productive. I typed out my entire opening statement and read it from my phone to start our conversation. This is obviously a significant advantage, given that Charlie can only guess what topics he'll be asked about on any given day, whereas those debating him have had multiple days, if not weeks, to prepare their argument on a single issue. No matter how long Charlie has been commenting on politics, it would be hard to argue the odds are heavily stacked in his favor, given the significant advantage that preparation on a single topic provides his challengers. Also, no one was forced to debate him. Those who did were people who wanted to speak with him, and in most cases, they were people who were eligible to vote in American elections. It's not as though he was restricting his challengers to just university students. Professors and people with no relation to the university, such as myself, were also able to speak with him. It's worth noting that he has also had long-form debates with both professors and pundits in the past, with Turning Point USA's Debate Night series being just one example. Charlie's critics also seem to forget that Charlie ran Turning Point USA, which focuses on college campuses as one of its primary points of activism. With hundreds of college chapters across the country, it would make sense that if one of Turning Point USA's goals was to bring the conservative message to college campuses, that their leader would actually go out and talk to college students himself. And if they wanted to be as effective as possible, it would also be reasonable to expect them to spread their message on social media to more young Americans, who might start new campus chapters or join existing ones. To be fair, I do think Turning Point USA and Charlie's social media accounts could change the way they handle titles and thumbnails to appeal less to people who seem to need a daily fix of liberal humiliation and more to people who simply want to see a debate or conversation on a specific issue. For example, titles like "Rainbow-clad trans activists won't stop yelling nonsense at me" with a thumbnail of a woman with her pointer finger up at Charlie can come across as content for an audience addicted to seeing disorderly liberals rather than as content trying to reach those across the political aisle. Similarly, thumbnails such as those saying "Charlie Kirk versus college soy" are subject to the same criticism. I'm not saying that the bold titles are necessarily inaccurate. For example, if you watch the "Rainbow-clad trans activists won't stop yelling nonsense at me" video, it would be hard to argue that the title is inaccurate, except that they should drop the S in activists since it was just one person in the video. Criticism number two, he wasn't there to actually change his mind. Interestingly, the strongest evidence of this that I've come across is actually my conversation with Charlie about the moral culpability of mothers and abortion. In my opening statement, I presented what I believe is strong evidence in support of my position. I also asked Charlie twice in the conversation what evidence, if any, could change his mind. Frankly, if you watch the video, he didn't respond with very clear disconfirmation criteria, if any at all. Here's the clip where I ask him a second time what evidence, if any, could change his mind.
I actually think they are victims. We just disagree.
Okay, so what evidence could persuade you?
Well, nothing that you cited, but just anecdotally, when anecdotally, which does form opinion, and I'd have to find more data. I know women that I've met that have gotten abortions almost always have a second or third party assisting, subsidizing, or notifying them in doing that. Secondly, a lot of the women that have abortions, they're filled with regret, because many of the times of the people I've met, maybe you have different experiences, they say, if I would have known the complexity of what that actually was a human life, they would have maybe made a different decision. So we just disagree. I have a different approach, and thank you for your time today. You tried to change my mind, but you did not. Thank you.
The closest I got to an answer was that he might have implied he would reconsider his position if, first, his anecdotal experiences of women saying other parties assisted in the abortion process were shown to contradict empirical evidence. And second, he was presented with data contradicting his personal experience of women claiming they would have decided differently if they had understood the complexities of human life. However, I think it's a stretch to conclude he genuinely offered any clear disconfirmation criteria for his belief. Well, it would have been great to get clear disconfirmation criteria from him. In my experience, when I talk with people about contentious issues like abortion, they will rarely change their minds on the spot, even when presented with evidence that satisfies the very disconfirmation criteria they may have provided earlier. Yet I don't think this means conversations like the ones I have with college students and the one I had with Charlie have no impact. Changing one's mind on positions deeply held takes time, and it's rare for anyone, left, right, or politically non-involved, to change their position on a highly charged issue on the spot. One of the things Charlie said in our conversation was, quote, "and I'd have to find more data," end quote. That's the key. Suppose Charlie really did later look for more data. In my opinion, that is what demonstrates that he's open to changing his mind. Well, it could be argued that the data I provided him should have been enough on its own. The reality is, as far as I'm aware, I was a stranger to Charlie. Trusting statistics a stranger provides you is difficult and, frankly, sometimes dangerous. So saying you'd have to find more data is a positive response. A better response, in my opinion, would have been something like, if the information you presented is true, which I would want to verify later, then I would reconsider X, Y, and Z. Yet in a live conversation, no one says everything perfectly. Moreover, I'd consider it a win if someone lowers their confidence in a false belief. For example, suppose Charlie speaks with someone who presents information or arguments he had not considered before. While he may not have changed his mind on the spot, it is quite possible he lowered his confidence in one of his beliefs or was prompted to do more research to evaluate whether his confidence in a belief was justified. I'm also reminded of something Sam Richards said in his SOC 119 class the day after Charlie's death in response to a student who asked how Charlie showed he was changing his mind.
I'll tell you how I know that he shifted his thinking, because you cannot be engaged with human beings in the way that he was and the way that I am, day after day after day. You cannot engage at that level and shift the way you see the world. And I listened to the complexity of his arguments over time, and I'm like, yeah, that dude's like, these things are getting to him.
Personally, I have probably spoken to hundreds of college students in person, not yet thousands, and it has changed the way I think about the issues I discuss. It honestly does feel impossible for it not to. One example of this is I used to label myself an abolitionist of abortion, and I believed it was wrong to pass any incremental pro-life legislation that fell short of equal protection, even if it would have saved some preborn lives. Some pro-life college students challenged me on this position, and while I did not change my position on the spot, I later did. Those conversations sparked me to further evaluate my position. I did more research, tuned into pro-life versus abolitionist debates, and eventually made a video explaining why I changed my position. In response, I got a ton of pushback. Most of my audience was abolitionists, and many really did not like my change in position. I lost subscribers from that video and frankly upset much of my core audience. I still get comments today saying that I am wrong and should return to abolitionism. One abolitionist account on Twitter even said that I had become castrated by listening to Doug Wilson, who is a proponent of smash mouth incrementalism. The point is, even when people don't change their mind immediately when presented with strong evidence or reasoning, that doesn't mean they are unwilling to ever change their mind or that they're acting in bad faith. As a personal example of the latter, in a debate I had with Dean Withers and Parker that shifted into an evaluation of free will and the problem of evil, I supported contradictory statements without recognizing the contradiction. I didn't recognize this during the debate, but later I did, and I admitted that I contradicted myself. It wasn't that I was acting in bad faith during the debate. I just genuinely didn't see the contradiction in my statements at the time. I still consider myself a Calvinist for what it's worth, but the conversation made me realize I didn't properly understand Calvinism. As a result, I later did research to better understand what I was getting wrong. It would also be unfair to assume someone is closed-minded simply because they don't agree with you. It is possible for someone to be open-minded and act in good faith, yet not change their position on a multitude of topics. In fact, even if they do not change their mind when presented with an irrefutable argument against their position, that doesn't necessarily mean they're acting in bad faith. They may just need more time to better understand what is wrong with their reasoning. Criticism number 3. He wanted clips of him dunking on college students rather than substantive conversations. I won't repeat what I mentioned in my response to point 1 here, but much of it also applies to this objection. One problem with this argument is that you can't fault Charlie for making good arguments or fault Turning Point USA for having an effective social media machine. As mentioned earlier, I would like to see them change how they title videos and design thumbnails, since sometimes it does come across as preaching to a MAGA choir rather than trying to reach across the political aisle. But at the same time, if Turning Point USA dialed back the intensity of their titles and thumbnails, I suspect Charlie's critics would continue making this argument so long as Turning Point remained equally effective on social media. And that's where I think a lot of the criticism stems from, the fact that Charlie Kirk and Turning Point were effective. In a way, some of the criticism feels as though Charlie and Turning Point's real sin was not debating college students, but winning those debates and effectively spreading them. To be fair, it isn't like TPUSA as a neutral debate platform. They aren't. They want to push conservatism just like socialist organizations want to push socialism and libertarian organizations want to push libertarianism. It seems reasonable for Turning Point to exercise judgment in which conversations they post and which they don't for at least a couple of reasons. Number one, it's not their job to be neutral. It is their job to promote conservatism. Number two, sometimes crazy shit happens, and it is reasonable to account for that by exercising discretion in which events are live streamed or published and which are not. Sometimes this may also work in the student's best interest. For example, one student I spoke with on camera spoke directly into his microphone and said that he cheated on a Spanish test. I used my own discretion and chose not to publish that video, even though a video titled "College Student Admits to Cheating in School During Debate" might have performed well. For the record, I don't title my videos like that, but you get the point. Had it been live, he could have faced punishment by the university. Other concerns I have over live streaming are the potential for people to leak addresses and falsely accuse other students of crimes such as rape. Turning Point also probably has hours upon hours of footage, and some conversations might not be worth posting for a variety of reasons. Technical issues, not wanting to reward trolls with views, or simply not having productive or engaging conversations for whatever reason. It's also not as if those speaking with Charlie at his Prove Me Wrong events were ignorant of the fact that they were being filmed. For some attendees like me, the fact that the conversations were filmed and posted online presented an opportunity to spark further reflection on topics that I find important. For example, my conversation with Charlie has been viewed millions of times. This Twitter post from a while ago got over 1 million views on its own and seems to have further encouraged consideration of women's moral culpability in abortion. To wrap up, the most common objections to Charlie Kirk's activism either misunderstand his intentions or seem to imply that his activism would only be acceptable if it were less effective. These criticisms don't hold up under close scrutiny. And to the extent that criticism of Kirk is centered around the titles and thumbnails used in his videos, his critics would do well to examine if they maintain their objections to those on their own side, such as Dean Withers, who, as far as I can tell, has titles and thumbnails that any objective observer would view as catering far more to our culture of political outrage than those used by Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk. If you enjoyed this video, please consider buying some of my merch, which you can find a link to in the description. Also, consider supporting me through my Buy Me a Coffee link, which you can find on my website.